Okay, when I say Bacon Creamery and Bacon Hosiery Mill, what do you think of?
Going in and getting ice cream inside the creamery. They had a box in there. You could go in and buy ice cream, those little cups. I don't know if they were 2 cents or 5 cents. That's what I think of.
And the wooden spoons.
The wooden spoon.
Yeah. When you say Bacon Creamery, I think of a myriad of memories. My dad worked at Charles H. Bacon Hosiery Mill for 25 or 30 years. I spent 2 summers down there working with Joe Russell mopping up oil pans. That was the nastiest, awfulest job in the world, but it was fun. And then my granddad ran Colonel Bacon's farms, and all the milk that they produced on those farms came to Bacon Creamery. So I'm intimately acquainted with the creamery. And here again, when you say creamery, I think of names. I think of the Lennoxes and Carl Hardin and Mr. Patton and just so many names attached to the creamery and the hosiery mill. One of my favorites is Garland Lindsay, one of the greatest storytellers that ever came through Loudon. And we've had several, Frank Robinson and a bunch of those, Mr. Quinn.
Yeah.
But Garland Lindsay was an absolute master storyteller. Tell you a lie and make you believe it, and you know he's lying. And the creamery does bring back a lot of memories. I remember picking my dad up from work after work the second shift. I remember sometimes he would be able to work a double shift, then to be off on Friday. And you know, it doesn't seem like much now, but if you had a job at the hosiery mill or the chair factory in Loudon, you had a good job. It was steady and dependable, and for a lot of reasons, the hosiery mill for years and years and years was backbone of Loudon.
Yeah.
And until '56, I guess, when Visking came.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you mentioned the hosiery mill and the creamery, I just have, my mind floods. I need a whole lot of time to sort it out.
The milk truck.
The milk
They
truck.
had the
Yeah,
milk truck.
yeah.
What are your memories of the Bacon Homeplace?
Well, we've all got memories of the Bacon Homeplace, yeah. For the last, before the old Homeplace was actually taken over by TVA, my uncle and his family lived in it. And it was the most fascinating house, probably the Greer house up above Joe's house, and it were the 2 most fascinating houses to me. But I remember the sunroom, I remember the old slate roof, the huge rooms and high ceilings, and Miss Betty, Joe's aunt or great aunt, yeah, had a wonderful ability to make anything look good, and she had gardens, formal gardens at the old house. And Colonel Bacon kept someone on them all the time, and they were absolutely beautiful year round. And the thing that sticks out in my mind is I don't know when the house was built, but I remember from 1942. So
1917.
okay, and this is what George does. He knows dates and things like that. But there was a shower, Colonel Bacon's shower. And it had 3 shower heads. He was a fairly tall guy, and one shower head would do this, and then I suspect for the middle part of his body or something, he had another shower head, and they all had controls, and then you have one down around your knees. And I'll never forget that. I just remember those things. The kitchen was probably the most modern kitchen I've seen at those. I mean, we grew up on wood stoves, and they had the real McCoys. They did, and it was. Joe, jump in.
Well, I guess we go to the creamery in the mill. My grandfather was Don P. Smith, and he owned the Don P. Smith Chair Company across the bridge the other water tower in Loudon. And so our family never worked particularly at the mill. Now, my wife's father, Mr. Bill Schubert, he worked there for years. And I had friends that worked there in high school. And I remember my dad, stepdad Jack Leffler, talking to me, and he said, Joe, he said, you could go over in front of the full fashion department. That's the part that was going towards the railroad track. And there was more new Buicks and Chevrolets and Fords in that lot. And those people that worked day shift there, relatively speaking, had good jobs for this area. Of course, Oak Ridge provided better jobs, or more paying jobs, but you had to drive. And then in the 50s, the King Corporation came across the bridge, and people migrated to those jobs. But for a good while, those were the better jobs. And I remember the Bacon Creamery, and I didn't bring the picture, but back in high school days, Mr. Charlie Breakable, who went on to be vice president at UT, worked as a general sales manager for the Bacon Company. And Bacon got the contract for the milk at UT for the training table. And he also had permission to sell ice cream at Neyland Stadium. So on Saturday mornings, he would get a group, 15, 20 boys, and put us in an ice cream truck, and we'd go up to the UT Stadium, and we had a bag with a block of dry ice in it and some ice cream sandwiches. Bacon's ice cream, 10 cents. And so I remember that association with that. Miss Betty Bacon was my great aunt. She was Betty Mourfield Bacon. And my grandfather, Joe Mourfield, who passed away in 1933, 10 years before I was born, was her brother. And there was several in the Mourfield family, but that was my association. I never knew Colonel Bacon directly. I remember seeing him. I visited him in the hospital. My grandmother, Ruth Mourfield, was a LPN, and she worked there, and she probably through family ties, being Charlie Bacon being her brother-in-law, she helped take care of him. And I remember going over there, and he was kind of in the bed, and he was kind of didn't know a whole lot that was going on. I just remember they said, "There's Joe," and I got a wave. Just talking about the farmhouse out there. I went out there several times with my grandmother Mourfield, and we had lunch in the kitchen. And I remember the big kitchen and the sunroom with all those windows, the shrubbery outside, and I could go down and play in those barns, and get up in the hayloft. And there was a fellow that drove Mrs. Bacon named Hugh Todd, and he had a son named Hugh B, who was about my age. And so I would play with Hugh B. Todd when I was out there on the farm. And I don't know how many times I went out there, but I was there several times. I have some memorabilia from that house. We went out there after it was started to be, I guess this is actually admission to theft. But on the back door there was a plaque that said Charles H. Bacon, Justice of the Peace, and I have that. And there was a nice back screen door, and I got it, and it was on my house for some time. I had the guy fit it to where I could have the screen door off the Bacon house. But anyhow, my memories of the hosiery mill and the creamery, and I don't know if I ought to tell the story about Uncle Dick Ferguson and the ice cream or not. maybe.
But you're going to, right?
Well, yeah, I will.
And we all probably will add something to that story.
Yeah, there was a machine shop in town, and Mr. Ferguson, M.L. Ferguson,
Uncle Dick.
Uncle Dick, Miller Dale Ferguson. And he was a consultant and a real confidant of Colonel Bacon and Carmichael Greer, and he was on, in fact, on the Cornerstone. His name is on there, Mr. Ferguson. And he would go down there and hang around. Of course, anything he'd fixed or made, he did it, and he kind of had free reign. He used to go by the creamery and maybe get him some ice cream or a quart of milk to take home. And one day, Mr. W.C. Patton was standing there, and he got it, and he said something about him paying for it. And he said, hey, he said, they sell that ice cream up the drugstore. Man, I think he maybe slid it back over there and went on home. And I talked to Mr. Ferguson a couple of times in my lifetime, but just, I wasn't that familiar. But he was kind of a gruff old fellow, as I understand from others. And to make the story shorter, he went on home and something tore up or something like that, and they needed him to fix it in the creamery. And he told him, said, well, if you want it fixed, why don't you go up and see if you can get it fixed at the drugstore? So
my mom loved that story the first time she heard it, and she used that a lot.
Yeah.
Don't be like that. Don't be smart.
Uncle Dick was a machinist without equal. He could,
Oh, yeah.
And his shop was kitchen clean. He could fix or make most anything. But he was as abrupt and as rascally as anybody you would ever hope. It didn't matter. It could have been the President of the United States, the pastor of the church, his brother or sister. And to add to Joe's story just a little bit, Uncle Dick lived down behind and his sister lived down behind the Full Fashion mill. The house is gone now, of course. And he walked from his shop up on Mulberry Street down to his house and ate lunch every day. And the way I heard the story, on the way back, he stopped to get his ice cream.
Yeah.
And Mr. Patton told him, well, they sell that up at the drugstore. So Mr. Dick just slid it back and went on his way. But I've been with my granddad several times. Something on the farm would break. There'd be some piece of equipment that you needed welded back together or machined a piece for it or something. And if you just told Mr. Ferguson what you wanted and went on about your business,
Yeah.
he'd take care in a heartbeat. But if you went in saying, "Oh, I'm broke down. This is very important. It might be next Thursday before you got around to getting it."
Yeah, if you put pressure on him, I
Yeah.
understand, but he said, they said this couldn't be fixed, but you can do it and throw it down.
Yeah.
He'd be right on.
Yeah.